Hi, my name is Adam David, and welcome back to my channel, Spirit University, where you find the occult and the scientific meeting in one place to better ourselves and humanity. Today we're going to look at what causes an object to follow the ground, aka what causes gravity. Well, Einstein would say that the more mass an object has, the more it creates a dimple in space-time, and this dimple allows an object to kind of roll down into a pit or the center. Now, he doesn't quite explain what this center is or why there is even a center, but he does get to the point where he understands that it's a vortex to the center. He used the space-time curving analogy as a stopgap measure to explain the funnel-like behavior of gravity. He never intended it to be a permanent solution. So in this video, we're going to look at what the more recent scientific discoveries say about the cause of gravity and what it has to do with us and our souls and the plasma around us. Because believe it or not, plasma is gravity. How does this relate to spirituality and plasma? Well, without gravity, neither of these would be possible, because it's with gravity that your soul stays inside your body. And in this presentation, I'm going to show you how. So before we get started, there's a few things we need to understand. First of which is, what is the Planck length and how does it relate to the quantum? The Planck length is the smallest unit that we've been able to come up with mathematically. It was come up with by Maxwell Planck. He was able to mathematically devise that the number 1.616 times 10 to the negative 35 is the smallest unit we can mathematically devise. And at this scale, it's believed that quantum mechanics and gravity begin to dominate the entire universe. And at this scale, everything starts to break down. The quantum, electromagnetics, chemistry, and even the electron all start to behave in very odd ways. They believe at this scale, space-time begins to be quantized or broken up into little bitty chunks, where you can start to see different particles and pieces of the quantum soup, as they call it. And what is really happening at the Planck scale is that there's a series of different fields that we call scalar fields or Higgs fields that exhibit quantum proximity at the scale. The next thing we need to understand is, what is charge collapse? More specifically, what is electric charge collapse? A good way to explain charge collapse is the path or trajectory electric charge takes when it's being pulled towards the center of more polarized dipoles or electric toruses, like one atom to another transferring their charge. This path is what creates a constant pull or acceleration towards the center until arriving at Planck length, assuming there's no obstacles or other charges that get in the way. For instance, here on Earth, everything is being pulled right to the center of the planet due to the Earth's core itself having a negative charge. Here on this slide, we can see the Earth's charge and how it affects us. Here on the right, you can see us with our plasma torus field. It's magnetic, and this does extend beyond the body about 60 feet according to our instruments, which is pretty fantastic. This is also a big source of the reason that we have an aura. And you can see this is constantly being retracted into ourselves and as well interacting with the other fields around us. On this slide, we see an animated example of what we were just talking about. Here on the left, you can see electric charge falling into this vortex as it spirals down to the Planck length until it gets converted into discrete chunks or longitudinal interferometry, or EMF. On this slide, we see the pine cone and how it uses gravity to control its electric charge so that it can penetrate the ground with as much efficiency as possible. Along with this, it allows them to distribute charge to the seeds, allowing it to germinate and create as strong of a tree as it can. As you see at these golden ratio spirals, the 1 through 8 and the 1 through 13, they are arranged in this spiral pattern to distribute charge along this pattern. This is the key to having charge collapse that is beneficial to life and not destructive, or as we call it, negentropic. However, not all charge collapse is equal. The path or the trajectory of how you get to the dipole does matter. And this is what has been missing in modern physics in terms of understanding how to build energy efficient systems. Here in this slide, we see Kepler's photonic solid map of the solar system. And what that means is that he has arranged these platonic solid shapes in a way that they fit inside of each other and create a infinitely repeating compressible and nested system. It begins with a dodecahedron and it ends with a pyramid or a tetrahedron. And each one of these edges and vertices act as waveguides for the electric charge wave propagation to travel. To show more evidence of this, scientists have discovered that the orbitals of atoms and their electron shells are in the shape of platonic solids. The SPDF suborbitals are a way to describe the electron configuration of an atom, and they represent the regions or zones around where the electrons are probably found, where they're contained. These suborbitals are part of the electron shell and the structure of the atom. Scientists have noticed that each suborbital of the type 2, 6, 10, and 14, they match the number of vertices of the platonic solids, like the tetrahedron, octahedron, the cube, and the icosahedron. Here on the right, you can see this more broken down. This one is hydrogen here, kind of the holy grail of everything. Without this one, we would have nothing. Hydrogen makes the universe go around. Here on this slide, we see more examples of how platonic solids exist throughout chemistry and the basic atoms. And you can see here on the left that they all do nest inside of each other at these different ratios. So what you start with is a dodecahedron, and then that goes into an icosahedron, and the icosahedron has another dodecahedron inside of it. And then inside of that dodecahedron, there is 5 cubes rotated around. That's you can see that here. And then inside of that cube is the octahedron, as shown here, followed by another cube, followed by 2 inverted pyramids, or star tetrahedron, or as some call it, the Merkaba. And then here on the right are cymatic patterns of these atoms, and you can see where there are dense white spots. These are standing waves, or where electrons are concentrated. This is a solid pattern for these atoms. Here's another page from Kepler's manual. This is pretty cool, I thought. You can see how he went through this whole thing and drew out all these things, which is incredible. Here's an arrangement of the shapes and their different elements. This is the Star Mother kit. This was created by Dan Winter and his group. This is a model of the platonic solids, as we were just talking about. This is a series of Connects-like sticks that you can use to recreate the dodeca, icosa, dodeca, cube, octa, star tetrahedron nest. Here on the top right, he's putting some bubble fluid in the center, and then by adding and subtracting air, it retains its shape of the dodecahedron. This is the perfect example of fractality, which allows perfected charge collapse to happen. It's because the electric charge loses no information on the journey from the top towards this absolute center of the Star Mother kit, or every single atom in the universe. This slide shows how different geometric shapes can affect charge distribution. Here on the top, we have the triangle and the pentagon. These shapes distribute charge because they are odd numbered, and that is a fancy way of saying that 3 lines go in, 1 line comes out, or 5 lines come in, 1 line goes out. And that's because they're not able to compress effectively, because there's one angle that's always going to come out. Here on the bottom, you'll see that even number sides are able to contain charge due to the fact that they are able to contain and perfect compression. And you'll notice that these shapes are on the surfaces of all of the platonic solids. And that's not an accident. Each platonic solid both concentrates and distributes charge to its next nested neighbor. It's a fantastic system. And this leads into what happens when perfect compression happens. Well, the waves are translated from an up and down motion that we all know and are used to a packed motion where they squeeze and refract inside of the transverse waves. These waves can both constructively and destructively interfere with each other, and that allows a lot of really cool things to happen. For instance, there's a phenomenon known as negentropy, or also called time reversal, is the idea that waves can travel back in time and reverse any destruction that was done to them simply by restructuring itself to its original pattern. So what makes these longitudinal waves different from their transverse cousins? Well, these are often called scalar waves, and that's due to the way they're tracked with mathematics. They operate in stacks or within the transverse waves. So these are within the matter around us. It's like when waves crest on a shore and they swell back in the ocean. It wasn't until the ocean hit the shore that the packing motion became an up and down motion. Because of that translation of vorticity, the waves were created. However, the original packing is still contained in the waves and it begins to swell, as we see in this picture here with the red dot. Longitudinal waves operate in a sets of harmonics, giving infinite amounts of space to work with. It's a worlds within worlds and layers upon layers. It's fractality embedded within the transverse. This allows for instant communication between both ends, simply because when one thing is added here, the other side has to shift. This translation from longitudinal to transverse and transverse to longitudinal is the cause of fractality. So how does everyday electricity as we know it and matter translate into longitudinal waves? And how does it matter to us? Well, transverse waves constructively interfering, changing up and down into wave-like packets. So they end up being within waves, or packets within the waves. This is similar to how waves cross upon a shore, and when the waves lose their up and down component, they appear to swell back into the surface of the ocean. So what's the path to get a longitudinal wave? Well, it happens when there's a translation of vorticity from the transverse waves. At the Planck scale, there is a packing that happens due to the amount of compression. Here on the bottom, you can see this animation by Dan Winter again, with the up and down transverse waves being translated down this series of constructive interference until arriving at the Planck length, and then being shot out and translated into longitudinal EMF. And a great feature of these is that they are ordered in structured patterns. Here's a YouTube video showing what we were talking about with the waves. As you can see, the water is just ebbing and flowing, but as it hits the shore, it gains this up and down motion, or waves. And then once the waves lose their momentum and they crash on the floor, they slowly recede back into the ocean. What they're really doing is they're taking the information of the seashore and all the rocks and everything that it ran into, and it's bringing it back into the ocean as information. So what is the difference really between transverse and longitudinal waves? Well, first, it's phase conjugation that is the cause of converting transverse waves into longitudinal waves, because it's at the center of phase conjugation that the two waves constructively interfere, allowing a collision at the Planck scale. And as we discussed, it's at the Planck scale that these transverse waves are broken down, sorted, and shared with the collective in the terms of being a longitudinal interferometry that everyone knows about immediately. Everyone within the longitudinal waves. Because it's at the center that all the magic happens. This is the still point that everyone always talks about in spiritual practice. This is the center of everything. The center of our hearts, the center of our brains, the center of every single cell, the center of every single planet, the center of every single thing. All this shape. On this slide, we see on the left here the Star Mother kit, and on the right we see an overlaid image of what is called heterodyning, where waves constructively interfere with each other and they allow each other to speed up until reaching speeds of up to 2 times the speed of light until arriving at center. And it's this constructive interference that allows waves to do this action of translating from transverse to longitudinal. And as I said, still points and points of vorticity change are portals. So in hydrodynamics, there's a concept of translation of vorticity. And this is the place where up and down motion of the waves get converted into packets or longitudinal. This is often called scalar, as we talked about. This can also be called a spark gap. Vertices on the dodecahedron, icosahedron, cube, tetrahedron nest act as waveguides, and these allow the vortices on the dodecahedron, icosa, cube, tetra nest act as waveguides for the flow of electric charge towards the center of every object unless interfered with. The vertices of the dodeca-icosa nest act as waveguides, allowing charge to flow towards the center using these heterodyning constructive patterns. There are spots on the Earth where this happens, and we call them hotspots for strange activity. Places like Sedona and where the Great Pyramid is are some examples. These places can be thought of as natural and artificial places of charge collapse. So a good rule of thumb to follow here is where the vertices of the platonic solids meet, implosion is more likely to happen. These locations of strange activity can be artificial and natural, and a good rule to follow is that where the vertices of the platonic solids meet, implosion is more likely to occur. So on the Earth, this translates into the location of many sacred sites across the world, along with the nodes of the dodecahedron laid across the Earth. And at sunrise and sunset, these places kind of get supercharged due to the alignment of the sun with the horizon of these sites. Sedona is a great place to go and experience the sunrise on the vortexes for this very reason. Here's the Earth overlaid with the dodecahedron vertice map. As you can see here is Sedona, here are the Great Pyramids. Relating this to spirituality, many of you may be familiar with the Egyptian light bulb, and it's been confused for many different things over the years. But serious evidence supports that these tubes were filled with some sort of noble gas, and they had a high electric current put through them at an oscillating frequency that would allow phase conjugation to occur. And when put in the middle of these plasma tubes, this created a high electric environment for organic materials to do what they do best, which is to pull an electric charge and translate it into life. So for instance, this creates a great place for people to meditate, to heal, for us to germinate seeds, for us to contact the higher and lower realms of existence, the spiritual realms. As you can see here, the two serpents inside have a vortex-like pattern and a 2D perspective. On this slide, I've overlaid the one over the other, and while it's not perfect, you can see that there are phase conjugate angles at different points, creating constructive interference or creating a negentropic field. Here on the right is the JED tower, an electrical tower that provides electricity throughout the Egypt region. Here's some graphics showing the different ley lines and how you can find them. This is a great website where I like to look up where different parts of the Earth intersect, maps.leylines.net.